Welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Hi everyone, Lewis from Let's Talk Micro here, and I'm just live from ASM Micro 2023, and I am just sitting here on the third floor, recording live for an episode. And anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about what I have seen today and what I have liked. So overall, it was it's been this whole experience has been great. Uh, one thing that I will say is that I have to stay organized because it is a lot of things. There are a lot of things to see and you can't do it all. So the app has been very great. However, you just have to be with the idea that you're gonna miss those stuff. So you really have to pick what you want to see. I mean, you sign up for sessions, and sometimes they're an hour or 2 hours long. If you want to interact with the poster presenters, they're only there, a couple of hours a day, typically from 10 to 11, 10:30 to 11:30. So you have to keep that in mind. But I have seen some great things today. I was doing some of the posters and I saw one about sage having some antimicrobial properties. I saw another one about silver nanoparticles used to treat showing activity on a Acinetobacter baumannii, and this is from India. On the poster, they talked about how how the patient actually had a pan-resistant Acinetobacter baumannii and unfortunately passed away. And they went ahead and they got some silver nanoparticles, and it has shown some activity against Acinetobacter. So that might look promising. I mean, if that's an area to explore, I mean, that will definitely be great. Another thing of interest was a poster that I saw, and this is from Advent Health, and I actually did an episode about it. So if you haven't checked it out, check it already. Please do so. About Naegleria fowleri, and it was a poster about the design and validation of a lab-developed test for detecting acanthamoeba, Naegleria fowleri, and Balamuthia. So three different species of amoeba on CSF samples. And the great thing about this test was, that it reduces, you know, even though infections with amoeba they're rare, but they are almost always fatal. Well, they are fatal if untreated. So detection is key. So they developed this test here in Orlando, and it's actually very stable. The stability of it for the sample, it's quite a bit. You can definitely check out the episode for more details. But it's very stable overall, and that helps out because adjacent areas, like somewhere in Georgia and adjacent states, Florida, they can send their samples in case that they are trying to rule out an amoeba. So definitely, it's a very important test to have. So it's very great. So like I said, check out that episode. But the poster was very interesting, and that was from Dustin Evans from Advent Health Orlando. Another great session that I attended this morning was actually from the clinical and public health microbiology track, and it was what's up with fungi these days. And we had some panelists, and they talked about they explained antifungal susceptibility testing and associate intrinsic antifungal resistance with a specific fungal pathogens. They talked about PCR testing and developing tests to detect fungi. They talked about the options that you have for antifungal testing. This is a panel of experts. Definitely, one of them has been a guest on the podcast, which is Dr. Sean Lockhart from the CDC. He did the episode about Candida auris, another great one. So if you haven't checked it out, please go ahead and do so. And then you also had Dr. Gary Prokop and Dr. Sarah Kidd. Sarah Kidd is also a fungal specialist, and she is from Australia. So overall, very knowledgeable subject matter experts, and it was a very interesting chat. As a microbiologist, a lot of times, in hospitals, we definitely give a lot of time and effort to bacteria, but we don't give fungi. It's more of a compartmentalized area. So typically, not enough people are trained. So generally in microbiology, you might go a lot of the time without even doing any fungal testing yourself. It might be restricted to PCR. and things like that. But as far as like reading mycology plates, a lot of times we are restricted to what we see on the bacteriology bench, which, as you know, most yeast they do grow in regular blood, chocolate, and even McConkey they can grow. Um, so you do get to see yeast, you see Cryptococcus, but a lot of times that's about it. That's the extent of it. So that was a little bit of what I have seen today, and stay tuned for there's going to be another episode, the one that I recorded in one of the studios yesterday. So it's mainly talking about the posters, the kind of research that I have seen. If you attend this event, uh, you probably more than likely have the app. So if not, download it. I think it stays open a little bit after the event, and all the posters that I'm mentioning, you can go ahead and look at them. They have a PDF with the written research, so that way you can see more if it's interesting. But like I said, the highlight of today for me was they were doing sage, using sage. It's from like the reservation land, and it was showing antimicrobial properties. And then there was an Acinetobacter that was pan resistant, so completely resistant. The patient passed away. They're doing some testing with some silver nanoparticles, and that's showing a little bit of promise. And the reason I'm kind of repeating that is because I had two guests just join me, and I was just kind of explaining what I was talking about before they got here. But I am in great company today. I'm with fellow podcasters, and they actually, they have a great podcast called the Microbe Moment with the Microbe gals. So here I have Jonathan Mitchell and Elizabeth Diet. All right, welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always good seeing you again, Louis.
Definitely my pleasure. It was great. I wasn't expecting to bump into you here, and let alone we have talked before about doing some sort of collaboration, and down the line, we'll do something. But it was great. It's been great. Kind of just the whole thing about these events is like you bump into other microbiologists and people, right? That you maybe the extent that you know them is like through Zoom, and you do collaborations and emails. So it's always nice to see people in person and connect. Tess and John. So what I've been talking to the audience is that I started relating my experiences. This is my first time here at ASM Microbe. And one of the things that I found was that it was very overwhelming.
100%. Yes, it's a lot.
Right? The good kind, right? It's not overwhelming that like when you get overwhelmed at work, that oh my goodness, I won't go home today on time.
Mhm.
This is just simply, it's a lot. Hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's over. Time to go to dinner and do something else. Come back tomorrow and do it all over again. So that's definitely a lesson learned. So for you, the audience, next time, if you come to this event, definitely get the app, start looking at some of the posters or some of the talks. But this is the reality. You won't be able to do them all.
Mhm.
I think that, and don't quote me on this audience, but maybe if you know someone, do a little bit of research or go through the ASM website. I believe they said that there's going to be some recordings available for some of them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're doing like recordings of everything, but it did seem like a bunch of them will be on demand. And I don't know if they've told us how long they'll be available either. Do you know?
No, they didn't say that. I just heard someone yesterday saying, oh, they're going to be there. But yeah, I definitely don't know how long. So if you're listening to this and when it comes out, the event has been over, but I'm planning on releasing this in the next few days. But definitely go back to the app or go to the website and ask, or if you know someone in the field, or check with them or anyone associated with the ASM event, definitely let them know. So Tess, actually, I was talking yesterday that you had a poster this year.
I did. Yeah.
So can you tell the audience what is it about?
Yeah, so I am in a very different field than what you are in. So I do a lot of environmental microbiology. I'm a bioinformatician. And so my poster was all about mining microbiomes and developing pipelines for low biomass samples. Low biomass samples are hard to extract DNA from, they're hard to collect microbes from. A lot of the pipelines already out there are developed for human gut microbiome interactions. So there's a lot of challenges in the environmental field to do the same things that people are doing in the human field. So I built these pipelines that I'm really proud about. I've spent the last year on them, so they're almost done. And we're able to use these pipelines to classify the different microbes that are in mining sites. And mining is a sector, an industry that often we don't talk about in microbiology. It's not something that we often talk about when we're thinking about sustainability or making things more green. But the mining industry has a lot of ways that they can become more sustainable and using microbes to do so, which I think is a really exciting field to be in and one that not many people are in.
Yeah, that is true. Unfortunately, AMR, consumes like a lot of the attention in microbiology. So a lot of times, other fields, like other areas, they don't get the forum, that it should. But definitely, it's more than just, clinical micro. It's a huge field, many things that can be done. And yeah, so right now the way that with antibiotic, abuse and all these things, definitely sometimes, they take the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about a conference like this is because you get to go to so many different talks. Like I've gone to talks that are strictly about sequencing data to AMR to host microbe interactions to phytoremediation and wastewater to wetlands. So it's just like there's so many different things, so many different talks at this conference that no matter where you are in microbiology, you can find something to do for 4 days straight for 12 hours, nothing but microbes.
I definitely agree. There's definitely it's separated here, and then and some of the listeners, if you haven't been to, yeah, they just split it, and they have like a antimicrobial resistant area. They have public health microbiology. They have an environmental track, something with the body, the host microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
So
they have a whole thing on climate change this year, which I think is new. I don't think they've had that in previous years.
okay,
So there's lots of different avenues for no matter what you study.
yeah, so that's great. So that's why I say definitely, if depending on what you like, do the research ahead of time, find out what the talks, specific topic. I know later on, I even saw there are some posters about archaea, which I'm looking forward to that. I touched a little bit, I studied a little bit about them, but not really, as far as my job, we don't really deal with them. So that looks very interesting. And John, since you didn't have a poster, I'll get to you in a minute. But I'll ask you the same question that I'm asking Tess. So far, what have you said you went to some talks, that are very interesting to you. So far, what have you liked the most about the event?
So I would say what I like the most about the event goes back to what you were saying earlier about just running into various people that I've met on Twitter, I've only seen in Zoom. You only know their handle and vaguely what they look like, but they seem to recognize you and you recognize them. And you just start chatting as if you've been friends forever. And you just talk about microbes and their poster and everything. So yeah, I've been to a lot of different sessions. I've learned a lot in that respect, but I definitely think it's the networking and sort of finally meeting people in person that I've been following for years. It's almost like a fangirl moment sometimes when you see some of the big names and you're like, oh my God, I follow you on Twitter. And they're like, oh, I know who you are too. It's just like a lot of fun to sort of have that recognition and be able to talk with different people that you never thought you'd see in real life.
Yeah, it's definitely a great feeling. And I had, like you said, you see their handle and maybe you see a picture. One thing I'm kind of learning sometimes with Twitter, like a lot of times I don't even click on their profile picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I see like you see the little face and that's it. And then you kind of just, all of a sudden, like you see them in person, I'm like, you don't recognize them. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. And then you actually expand the picture and you see who they are. I've done that a lot of times. And I encountered a couple people that like they're shaved in their picture on Twitter.
Right, they're different than
now
what
they have
they
a
are.
full beard. And I'm like, wait a minute. So it takes me a while. And the same thing happened with me. I have some of my even guests. Like I went over there, I recognized them, and they're like, it took them a minute. It's like, oh yeah, Louis, right? How are you? And then others, immediately saw me, and then they said, hey, nice to see you in person. So that was definitely great, and I had some people like I put. And you're listening to this, but like I brought a little tag with the podcast handle on it, and some people actually have seen it. And then
that's gotta be fun to have people come up and be like, oh, I listened to your podcast.
Yeah, I had yesterday. I went to this dinner with some members of the industry, and the first person that I walked in, they look at the thing and said that they're like, are you Louis from Let's Talk Micro? Like, this is great. I'm like,
little celebrity moment.
That's what she said. She's like, this is my celebrity moment. That's so great. It's like, oh. So it's definitely great, right? And you know this, you're doing your podcast and you like, you put a product out there, and when you meet someone that actually, that listens to it and enjoys what you're doing, it's your creation, right? You're putting all this time and effort. So definitely it's a great feeling.
It is, yeah.
Right.
It's like you're appreciated. A lot of times with the podcast, you don't know who's listening. It's like you're sending it out to a black box. So to put a face to some of that black box and take that away and be like, wow, people actually are listening and they care and they appreciate what I'm doing. And it's very invigorating to continue on and inspirational just to hear people say, we listen to your podcast, we love it.
Yeah, and that is true. Like you said, like a black hole. I experienced this. A lot of times, many episodes that I record, and I'm like, maybe is anyone listening
Yeah,
to
is
this?
anyone there?
Yeah, and then so when you get that feedback, and even though I do it for the communication, for the networking, and stuff like that, but it's a great feeling. So I appreciate everyone that has stopped by and say hello, and I even had yesterday. I was actually doing seeing this company about rapid AST.
Mhm.
So 5.5 hours to get acceptability, which is pretty good. And the person was giving me the demo about the instrument, and then he glanced at the thing. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh my goodness, like, are you Lewis from Let's Talk Micro? And he actually knew. I said, yeah. And then I talked about some collaboration, and he's like, yeah, you just did this recently. And like, oh, like
Wow.
this person is really following me. Like,
Yeah, he's really listening.
he's like, I'm just, I used to be a tech, now I'm in the industry, but I saw your podcast, I downloaded all the episodes, and so that was very amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So then you like the networking and any posters that you like that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the posters this year have been phenomenal. And again, they're all over the place as far as what they're talking about and what they're trying to do. The other thing that I really liked about, just as a general comment about the posters this year, is I think we collectively as a community are going away from the 3 columns and nothing but text on a poster. So seeing people's creativity come out in posters using colors other than just like using more than one color, putting more pictures into it is really cool. I actually saw this one person, they didn't even have a poster. They just had like their whole figures kind of on a on a background, and then they just pinned each of their sections onto their board. So it wasn't like one piece, it was like 8 or 9 different pieces, and it gave such a cool view to their own poster, because it wasn't just a sheet, it was almost like a flow chart or something that you can kind of follow and more abstract. So I thought that the creativity that you see in the posters has been really fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The only thing that I will say, it's just, but I understand because they're here for, they're presenting their poster at the same time, right? You're making it all the way here. It is expensive, and a lot of people don't have sponsors, and that's actually, as I'm gonna get sidetracked for a little bit, but I was going through a talk yesterday, and yeah, I had like some techs were saying like they didn't know a lot about ASM, and even when they found out, like for this event, it's like I can't afford to come over here. So circling back to the posters, so you're making all this effort to come here, you're presenting, so you also want to enjoy it. So I wish that sometimes you had, or people like were able to be there for more, like a little bit longer, because between the sessions, a lot of times by the time you finally make it, that hour just goes by so quickly.
Yeah, it goes by so fast.
Yeah. So I definitely, the ones that I saw and I wanted to make a point of really go see, like I put them on the app.
Yeah.
But if you're doing around, I mean, that hour in just the, the antimicrobial resistance section and public health, which is the one that are focused the most, it's gone. I even, by the time I finished the section, some areas were empty already.
Yeah. And it's always sort of a struggle when you're balancing that, because sometimes you're talking to the author of the poster and you get into a good conversation, and next thing you know, 40 minutes have gone by and you're like, well, that was a great conversation. Now I have like 18 posters I want to get to in the next 20 minutes. But yeah, I think it's often having those conversations that are better than the quantity of posters that you see, but being able to just connect with whoever is presenting.
Yeah, that is true. That is true because especially the person is very engaging and the research is very engaging. Yeah, even those 20 minutes they're worth it. So even if you see that maybe like 3 really good posters, instead of rounding to 10 or 20, yeah, it's definitely worth it because it once again it adds to that networking and talking to people, and that's always it's great. We were limited, right, because of the pandemic, the whole interaction, and sometimes I mean, personally, still, if I'm in a crowded area, I still get a little try to stay away from those, but overall, it's nice, right, connecting with people again and being in person. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask John right now. Thank you, Tess, and so, John, you didn't present a poster. So, what have you enjoyed about the conference so far?
I don't know. It's kind of hard because Tess uh, came on a lot of good points about what was good about the conference as a whole. So, I'm going around and I'm actually, since I'm looking at a place of industry, I've actually connected with some of vendors, which has been nice, and maybe they'll help further my research. Getting supplies for my research. But what I also really liked is I've seen some talks, and I'm like, oh, maybe I can use that. Oh, maybe I can use that in the lab when I get back. So getting ideas to test out when I get back, I think it's been really cool. I think also they've had a couple of fun things at ASM that I didn't really expect. Like there was talk as fun with fermentation. It's all about fermenting different foods, which was out of nowhere, but it was so fun learning about different foods. There were some foods I never heard about all of a sudden that were fermentable that I had never come across. And what was it? Yesterday, there was a clinical microbiologist on the floor who was taking folk songs, rewriting them so that they were, he's talking about different clinical situations and they were always funny. And he said, this is how I teach my students is I sing and I teach them microbiology that way.
Nice. So, wow, it's like I always love right when people find a way to convey their information to the students and they get creative. Uh, as educators, it's definitely difficult sometimes nowadays, especially with the attention span of the sometimes of the younger generations. I mean, that's just the way it is. So you have to get creative. Can you tell the audience what do you do as a microbiologist?
So I work at a startup and we're looking at two different projects. One's working on IBD and the other one is neurotypical behavior disorders. And really, does the gut brain axis have a big factor in it? And what can we do to try to help that? And in terms of IBD, we're looking at screening different small molecules to see if we can help reduce symptoms or even reverse IBD. And just to go back quickly, the person that was singing was Dr. Sheldon Campbell, which I forgot to mention. I just wanted to shout him out before I forgot.
All right, excellent.
But yeah, so we work on that, and I'm also trying to gain some ideas of maybe possible projects that we could work on, listen to other talks here, because there's a whole range of disorders and possible connections to the gut microbiome. So it's really interesting listening to these, and I'm going to bring it back to my company. And I don't know, maybe in the future we can develop projects around those.
Definitely sounds very interesting. So overall, it's also just like Tess, is your first time here at Microbiome 2023, Microbe 2023. So what has been your experience, right? So you saw some interesting things. Any advice for the audience? What have you liked? Maybe what have you found anything difficult? I think everyone is basically centering about the amount of information. I think maybe that's your experience too.
Yeah, I think that was the issue for me is I wish I really did, like you said, sit down and really tweeze out what I was going to go to, because I filled out the schedule on the app and I had triple booked things. I'm like, which do I go to? All these are close to what I research and they all sound cool. That was the hardest thing, is trying to decide what to listen to.
Yeah, definitely. And the last 2 days I came out with I'm doing a lot of stuff, meeting people, and then at the end of it I feel pretty good. It's like, yeah, it was overwhelming, but I think I got some good talks out of it. And then all of a sudden, like you pull your Twitter feed and then someone posts, amazing talk. I'm like, I missed this. I wanted to be here. But it's just one of those things. I think I got what I needed, but yeah, it's otherwise. Those can be two places at once, and it's just a lot of sometimes they overlap. So that's just the way it is.
We actually had a friend who went above and beyond. I saw him in a couple of talks. He would come in, listen to one talk, and these sessions usually have 4 or 5 talks. Get up, run to a different session, so he knew exactly the exact person he wanted to listen to, and he was running around the conference all weekend doing that.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, if you have that motivation, yeah, not to miss anything, yeah, by all means, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, overall, it was it has been great. A lot of vendors, so from different parts of the industry. Even some areas had like I know like they were giving like free coffee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was actually really good. Because if you were those of you that attended, there was like a Starbucks, but the lines can get pretty long. And
Yeah.
actually, John and I had that experience on day one. We did the line, and then we missed like the first few minutes of the opening speech, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
general session. Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, so it was a lesson learned from that one. But then even the lines inside, they can get pretty quick. But if you're there all day, just pick a time, and then and sometimes it's not that bad. But free coffee, and I think they also have some other things in the back. I think I saw like even like a Chick-fil-A for those of in the audience that like that all the way in the back.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had theater halls within the big area, and if you sat and watched through the presentation, they had food along the side. So if you're hungry, you go and watch a session, grab a food box, and go on to whatever you're doing next.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So okay.
I learned that a little too late.
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely learning it now on Sunday as it's almost over. But yeah, I think overall, pretty good. I think one of the talks that I went yesterday was sometimes about the lack of knowledge of people knowing about ASM, and like I mentioned earlier, um, yeah, especially I don't know how it is in your side of the microfield, but for us in the clinical side, a lot of times, yeah, you're a director in the hospital, they're very motivated, very knowledgeable, and then they're all in tune with that whole ASM. But as it trickles down of us in the lab, a lot of times people, yeah, they're completely unaware. Have to almost have the level of nerdiness that I have, and that need to know what's going on outside of what I do to be aware about all this stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just they need to. I think social media, right? It's a good. Maybe if I can ask you, what do you think about using social media for like microbiology and things like that?
I mean, I think it definitely has its benefits, right? I think one thing that we probably have issues with is how do we get across microbiology in a timely manner, because it's social media. Like what, Twitter is 240 characters. I don't know if that's changed anymore. And we're both very passionate about microbiology, so we could talk about it forever, but how do we simplify it? But yeah, if you can get that, I think my social media is definitely a great platform for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're limited by the characters and experience that sometimes, if you want to add a few hashtags to it, then that burns some of them, and
Yeah.
and you have to either do it like in a thread, right? But overall, pretty great to convene information, and that's how you actually, I tell everyone that listens. That's how I find my guests, and that's how I found out about you two and your podcast, which I'm going to ask you in a minute. But yeah, just following people, about microbiology, and it pops on the feed, and it's been a really great place to meet a lot of people, and now that comes to that, to that area where you actually get to meet them. And it's always pretty cool. Hey, we follow each other from Twitter. Hey, and it's like, hey. So the podcast, like I mentioned, I listened to your podcast. I have been a guest on it before. So what can you tell us, what is the Microbe Moment with the microbials? For those of us that are just, tuning in and then maybe they haven't heard about it, that's one of the things that before I continue, that I kind of learn, or maybe it's just about being a little naive or not understanding the power, right? Like you think that you're doing an episode, you create a Twitter account and you put something out there and everyone knows it, and that's not the way it is. I mean, you post a lot, and then a lot of people sometimes are like, "Oh, I didn't know you did this," and So yeah, so some people out there they might not know about your podcast. So what can you tell us about it?
So yeah, we developed this podcast, and really we're trying to like bring microbiology. We're trying to simplify it so that it's understandable for the general public, because as microbiologists we tend to dive too technical, um, and really we want to educate other people. And what we say is we're trying to make them have their microbe moment. You know, their inspiration of microbiology. What do they like about microbiology, or give them a bug of like, oh, I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, so I think that the micro moment really developed because people didn't have an appreciation, or a lot of people don't have an appreciation of how much microbes impact our every single day and have impacted our history. So we sort of developed the micro moment as a way to show, and a lot of people only know microbes as pathogens, as something that is going to harm you, as something that is to be feared and, a villain to our society. But microbes do wonderful things all the time for all of us every single day. And everyone has micro moments, some bigger and more significant than others, both good and bad. And so I really think it's interesting with microbiology. I don't think there's a field in the world. There's no one who doesn't have a micro moment. And I think microbes have impacted our history in so many ways that people have never connected before, because historians are not microbiologists. They're not looking through that lens. So the micro moment is really showcasing how microbes have touched our society and humanity in both good and bad ways, and how they might be changing our futures as well.
That is great, and I definitely, like I mentioned, I listened to it, and you have done things like, right, like microbes and space. You like this historical overviews, like take us on a journey, right? Um, I think you have done some Halloween episodes, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of Halloween, our Monstrous Microbes series, which is always a lot of fun. We do a lot of analogies of things. So we take different microbes and we make analogies to them. So our monstrous microbes, every microbe is a traditional Halloween monster. So we talk about how rabies is associated with werewolves. We talk about agrobacterium. No, that's not right. What is it? Ergot. Ergot might have caused the Salem witch trials of 1692. And so it's just kind of like a fun thing to associate something that maybe no one has ever heard of, and then associate with something that people have grown up with and something that they can really connect with. And we did the same thing with sci-fi. We looked at a bunch of sci-fi movies. We looked at Andy Weir, who is one of the keynote speakers tonight. He had two books that had to do with microbiology, The Martian and Project Hail Mary. And we talked about those and sort of the microbiology behind those two books as well. So it's really just been a fun way to try to get people engaged in microbiology when they're already engaged with other things, and how can we connect those, and try to reach people that may not be thinking about microbes as much as we are, which I don't know how many people in the world do.
Yeah, that is true. Not everyone thinks about. We're close in this field, and we look at it from a different perspective, but not everyone knows, especially yeah, like the impact of the microbes, and they're everywhere, and they're from water, and when you get to about a lot of microbes, with microbial resistant genes, and you have in the soil, and food, right, from your like John mentioned about fermentation, and you have right like Propionibacterium and cheese, and you have lactobacillus in yogurt, and yeast for beer, right? That's definitely a very popular one. At least I think if anyone doesn't know anything about microbiology, at the very least, maybe they know about yeast and beer.
Yeah, I think so. It's a popular one.
Right? That's a very popular one. So yeah, I like the spin you put on it. So is there any can you tell the audience anything upcoming? Are you working on anything fun, or what's next for the Microbe Moment?
So we're doing a series on bioterrorism, actually. So we released our first episode last Tuesday, and it started, pre BC, and we're making our way all the way to the 21st century, and then we're going to talk about, maybe possible agents of bioterrorism. So it's something that we've heard about. I've learned a lot about the history. You know, we always hear about the Black Plague. I think I mentioned to you earlier, like I had never heard of this disease called tularemia, which actually may have caused a plague in around 1300 BCE.
Yeah, with tularemia, we definitely learn about it because that's one of the agents that we have to be able to, right, in the lab to detect. We hope that we don't see it.
Right.
So definitely that's one of those, same as brucella,
Hmm.
which I always, and this is a little bit outside of the topic, but if you're a physician out there and for some reason you suspect any of these, um, let everyone know. I think a lot of cases of brucella that we have in the lab, it's a tiny, just a little bit of very gram-negative carcobacilli, grows very weakly. You have trouble, and then all of a sudden you have 5 people. Hey, what does this look like? Hey, I can't get this result, and then all of a sudden doctor says, hey, I was expecting brucella. You have 5 people now that have to go on prophylaxis.
Oh man.
So that's the way it goes a lot. So it's a little bit scary, right?
Right.
Because you don't think about, hopefully they're not expecting anthrax or something like that. That's gonna be a very long day for everyone in the lab. We gotta get locked in, and so, but yeah, so that's very interesting. Is that coming up soon?
Yeah. So our first episode has dropped. Working on the second episode right now, and we got a bunch more in the work right now.
Pretty cool. So, and then where can you find the Microbe Moment?
You can find it in all major podcast players: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Podbean. You name it, you'll probably find it there. And you could also find it on our website, microbicals.com.
Awesome. There you got it, microbicals.com. And I'll put it at the end of the show notes. So everyone wants to go ahead and check it out, which I exhort people to go ahead and do so. Please, definitely take a look at it. And you're also on Twitter and Instagram.
Yep, Twitter and Instagram. Those are the 2 platforms we work with.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So if you just search for @microbigals on Twitter and microbigals on Instagram.
Yeah. Definitely. And if you haven't, they're actually and this is from experience, like if you ever as a listener and if you have any questions, they actually sometimes, like you send a message to someone and they don't respond, but they actually answer pretty quick. So they try to, within reason, of course, not expect a message immediately, but they get back to you pretty quick. So there you have it, the Microbe Moment. So I'm going to ask now both of you, since, you said that, what is your Microbe Moment, John?
Ooh, I feel like it's constantly changing and evolving because I'm learning new stuff. Really, it started when I took a micro class when I was actually in the school for nursing. And I thought it was so cool that I was growing bacteria. And I'm like, wow, we do this all the time. It gave me a new appreciation because I had never seen the clinical microbiology side. So it was a little peek in the behind the curtain. So I was like, man, this is really cool.
What about you, Tess?
I've had so many micro moments, but the one that's most associated with clinical microbiology is my grandfather actually died from an AMR E. coli infection from a routine biopsy. So that was kind of a real shock at how microbes can really start and destroy someone's life in a really fast and quick way. And sort of from that, I kind of got really obsessed with microbes and for some reason had a major shift in sort of my thinking of microbes and started to learn how much they actually help us as well. So even though it comes from sort of a tragic state, I am still a lover of microbes and believe in the good that they can bring to the world.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely an experience, even on it doesn't compare over a very tiny scale, but as as microbiologists, we see a profile like that, and we feel even bad when we're putting these results out there, because we're trying everything. It's like, oh my goodness, this bacteria is resistant to everything. How are they going to treat the patient? And it's definitely very shocking, especially when you work with blood cultures, and then you have to make some notification and you see that the patient expires. So it's got to be So I can't even think. I never experienced that, but definitely having someone go to a hospital for something, right, and experiencing that, that's definitely awful. So, but yeah, they can definitely do a lot of good, right? So, And I think, I mentioned this one time, but for me would be, I think for me is, yeah, whenever I can, if I know there's well, I always try my best, but if I know there's a organism that I know that is very resistant, when I manage to isolate it, by either, especially, very mixed culture, by knowing the media and doing whatever it takes to get that organism and put that result out. That's always my micro moment. But overall, I think that, like I tell people this, overall microbiology as a whole, I think it's like, like I tried other areas. I worked in hematology, chemistry, and I will compare it right to that. It's like that person that is good for you, good values, good family, good job. But microbiology is true love. It doesn't treat me right sometimes. We go through our ups and downs, but I'm all in.
Yep, same.
There you go.
Oh, I just thought of one more micro moment for me is finding out that microbes are so hardy because when you start, you think like, well, we're multicellular organisms. We should be pretty resilient, right? And yet, one of the most resistant organisms to radiation is a single cell organism. It's crazy how strong, how resilient they are.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, I know, like Deinococcus, yeah.
Yeah.
For those of that's like the nightmare for those that work in the sterilization, and so yeah, they're very resilient. One thing that yeah, because we are, as our bodies, overall for most falls and stuff, we handle that. Uh, but one concept that when I started working in this, it really threw me off. It's like you can freeze the organism, and then it comes back to life.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, like sometimes wrapping your hair around that, and you're like, okay, yeah, I have this strain of E. coli, so you put them in some glycerol, you have it there, and it's basically, yeah, forever. You just thaw it a little bit, and then just bring it out, and there he goes, growing
Exactly.
again. So it's amazing, yeah, what they can do. Well, is there anything else that maybe you want to tell the audience?
I mean, they already listened to your podcast. I would say check out your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, just thank you so much for having us on your podcast again. It's always a pleasure. And I look forward to future collaborations between Let's Talk Microbe and the Microbe Moment.
It has definitely been a pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. I wasn't sure if anyone was going to show up. Sometimes people see it on social media, but this is a very busy event, and people are getting a session in or doing posters or doing whatever. So the fact that here both of you took the time, and it was great actually, doing an episode with both of you, because I know the last time I only got to work with John, so it was nice now working with both of you. So once again, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having us on. Really appreciate it.
Okay, so there you have it, audience. So I hope if you haven't gone to Microbe 2023, by now, just definitely go next year. It's a great experience. If you can afford it, just go, or if you have a sponsor. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. So as always, continue bringing that passion to what you do. It's so important. We do such great work. So stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro. Until the next time.